All right, so I want to do a review of the Godox speed lights for the Fuji camera system, specifically the TT685f, as well as the X1T RF transmitter. So I also have a Godox TT685f, primarily for on camera, but there's been a fair number of reviews of this guy already, so I'm going to focus primarily on the larger 685 speed lights. So just a quick bit of history. I used to shoot with Canon, and about a year ago made the switch over to Fuji. So when I was shooting with Canon, I used primarily, the 430EX speed light, which was great. TTL flash, very good speed light. I also used a few very inexpensive full manual newer 560 speed lights. So again, just full manual off-camera flash type of operation. And then in the studio I have a couple I should say, Paul Buff Alien B, AB or B800 lights. So and then to trigger all of that, I was using a few inexpensive Yongnuo RF transmitters. These were the, which model? YN622C. So those work great, again, for the Canon camera. I also actually used these when I transitioned over to Fuji about a year or so ago, as I mentioned. So when I switched to Fuji, I started doing research looking for a light that supported TTL as well as high-speed sync, so I could do some low depth of field, shots outdoors. And I read a fair amount about the Godox. They hadn't at the time been released. This was maybe like 3 months ago. They hadn't been released, but once they were, I went ahead and made the purchase. So I decided I would record this video. Hopefully I could help others who are going through the same kind of transition. So just real quickly, what comes in the box with the TT685f? Let's go ahead and take a quick look at that just briefly. There is an inexpensive case that's pretty typical these days. There is a stand, which I have mounted to the bottom of this particular guy. Just a, pretty typical flash stand. So I'll leave that there. As an optional little bundle, I guess, with my flash, I got the little holder, which just goes on the front of the flash with Velcro, and an assortment of about a dozen different gels. Okay. And last but not least is the manual, which I should say last and least, because the manual for this flash is just not very good. Very, very poorly translated from Chinese to English, and just really it's a confusing manual. Frankly, everything I learned about these lights I pretty much did via trial and error, because again the manual was so bad, but nonetheless it came with it. So one thing I discovered is that Adorama also sells their own branded version of these lights, and I'm drawing a blank on what they call them right now, the brand, but it is exactly the same light, just is the Adorama brand. And incidentally, I've discovered that the manual that comes with the Adorama lights is significantly better than the Godox written manual. So if you haven't yet made a purchase and you're considering it, that might be a reason to go ahead and buy the Adorama version. I chose the Godox because they were in stock earlier and they were available on Amazon, which is where I make the bulk of my purchases. So that's that. All right, so physically the lights, they're pretty standard, right? Like most other speed lights. Here's a comparison in terms of size to the Canon 430EX. So the Godox light is quite a bit larger. As far as a guide number, I think they're the same, although I'm not entirely sure. You can look that up on a data sheet. But, standard tilt and swivel, 270 degrees, 90-degree tilt. Has LCD display. We'll spend a lot more time going through that. The pop-up flash disperser. I was going to call it diffuser, but I think it really more disperses the light then diffuse it, but maybe it's one and the same. So we'll talk more about that as far as the zoom function as well in just a second. It runs on 4 AA batteries. I happen to use the Eneloop batteries. I found those work very, very well. But anyway, so 4 AA batteries in the side. Over here, we have a port that's got 3 different connectors. You might recognize the one on the top. That's the USB port for doing firmware updates to the flash, which I haven't yet done, but I do know there's an update waiting. I just need to read the release notes to see if it's a worthwhile update or not. And then the 3.5mm and the port at the bottom, both of those are PC sync ports. Okay? And then on the front of the flash, beneath the infrared port, is another interface, and that is for connecting an external DC power pack. So that's a nice feature, especially if you're working in the field and you don't want to continue to run off of your AA batteries. You can buy their optional battery pack. In fact, that DC input feature is something that not even this particular Canon Speedlight had. This is a 430, you have to upgrade to the more expensive, I think it was a 560 before you get the external battery pack support. So let's see what else. As far as the mount, it's typical, twist lock mounting system. I happen to like the Canon sliding lock system better, but I think this will be fine. The build quality is fine. I don't foresee any issues. I think it should hold up well over time. And then we'll go through all the buttons on the back, but you see across the top it's got 4 buttons there, and these are what I like to call software defined buttons. In other words, depending upon the mode that the flash is in, those buttons will perform different functions. And I will go through each and every one of those in just a moment. Then this is the sliding on-off switch, and then a dial in the center for adjusting the various settings. Okay? So that's the flash in a physical sense. Again, very, very good build quality, I would say. So I've got 2 of them here. I actually had 3. I sent one of them back, and I decided to have 2 of the 685s and a 350 that I'm going to use for, like I said, for on camera primarily. So let's go through, and I'll talk about the trigger in just a second as well.